So, hello everybody, welcome, and thank you all for coming. And the theme of today's session, led by the Seaside Heritage Network, is the transport heritage of the seaside. And of course, we all know that transport was central to the development of seaside tourism through the railways. But on top of that, there are also novel forms of transport that developed in seaside towns. And you've only got to think of the Daddy Longlegs in Brighton, or Blackpool's distinctive heritage trams, the cliff lifts in all their forms, miniature railways, and even monorails in some resort. So novel transport was one of the things that made the experience of being at the seaside extraordinary. And parts of this heritage of transport remain at the seaside today. But on top of that, new attractions based on transport have developed at the seaside. So think of all the heritage railways that have developed since the 1960s, which connect seaside towns. So places like Swanage and Whitby and Minehead and Cromer and Porthmadog and New Romney. And so unusual and distinctive transport remains central to the offer of many seaside towns and resorts today. So that was the inspiration behind today's seminar. So we got three speakers today talking about various very contrasting aspects of transport heritage at the seaside. We got Nicola Stone from Seaton Tramway. We've got Tim Stephen from Volk's Electric Railway, and we've got Steph Costello, who's talking about Saltburn Cliff Tramway. And so, can I introduce our first speaker, who is Nicola Stone, formerly the Learning Activity and Interpretation Manager for the Seaton Tramway in Devon, but she's recently moved to a new role as Manager of the Devon Rural Archive, but she's continuing as a Director of Seaton Tramway, and that's what she's going to talk about now. So, Nicola, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Really nice to be here. I've got a very short amount of time to get quite a lot of information in, so it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of basically how the tramway came to be in Seaton and how we've evolved into the visitor attraction we are today. So I've entitled my presentation From Trains to Trams. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit of background about why we are where we are in Seaton. As you may know, Seaton is on the East Devon coast. It's part of the Jurassic Coast, so it's part of the World Heritage Site. And it's a very important site. It's a marine conservation zone, and it's situated on the River Axe estuary as well. So a very beautiful part of the world. Going back to the 1860s, in 1863, the railway came to Seaton and it was a branch line basically that came down from the London line, branched off to Collyton, Colliford, and then down to Seaton. And it was primarily used for goods, really important line for the transportation of beer stone from the quarry in Beer, which is just along the coast from Seaton, also for leather goods from the Collyton tanneries, and also milk, so really important line for Devon farmers. And a bit later on became an important line for tourism. So the tourism industry grew and grew, and with the development of really big holiday camps such as Captain Warner's in Seaton, Seaton ended up welcoming thousands of people every year to the holiday camps. It was quite a big holiday destination for a time. Unfortunately, in 1966, the line closed due to the beaching cuts, and stood derelict, really unused for a few years. And that's when the story of Seaton Tramway comes in. So I just want to introduce you to Claude Lane. Claude is on the left there, born in 1908, had an absolute passion for all things electrical and battery operated things, was a bit of a whiz at science at school. And when he left school, he did engineering apprenticeships, and ended up setting up his own company called the Lancaster Electrical Company, based in Barnet in London. While he was doing his day job, he enjoyed building tiny trams. They were third scale trams, and he took them to parties and fetes. And there's a picture of him in a couple of the trams. You'll see how small they are there. But they were really, really popular. And people started asking him if he might like to think about setting up his own Tramway Company. And there you can see at the top picture there's Claude with a couple of our trams. The small tram on the right is known as the boat tram. We still have that tram, but it's slightly wider now, but it still operates on our line. In 1953, he decided to formalise this, and he set up modern electric tramways, and that is the company, the parent company, that still operates today from Seaton. He had a bit of a difficult time, actually. He rented the land for his trams, his tramway initially. First of all, it was at St Leonard's in Hastings, then at Rhyl in Wales, and then finally in Eastbourne. And he kept falling out with the local authority, and had a bit of a difficult time with people making complaints about noise and all sorts of things. So he got a bit fed up with this and decided to look for somewhere to have a permanent home, a strip of land that he could actually buy. And he came across the old branch line from down to Seaton. And after some negotiations and some years, he managed to secure that line. And so he bought it. And he bought the tramway from Eastbourne, lock, stock and barrel, all the way down to Seaton. Many lorry loads for bringing down the track, the trams, everything, until it opened finally in August 1970. And it's still there today. It's changed a lot since then, actually. So initially, the line only ran up a certain distance. It didn't go the full 3 miles that it is today, and it ran to a bridge called Bobsworth Bridge. And it wasn't until the 1980s, or actually 1980, that the line was fully extended up to Collyford and then Collyton. In the 90s, we built this. On the left, you'll see the Edwardian style terminus building. It was just a ticket office, really, with a shelter. And it wasn't original, although it actually, when we came to dismantle it, a lot of the locals were very upset that we were getting rid of this Edwardian building, but actually it was dates from the 1990s. In 2018, we were lucky enough to get a substantial donation, which enabled us to build our brand new station at Seaton, which you'll see on the right there. And that's a state-of-the-art building. It houses some of the trams overnight, but it also has a cafe and a small gift shop and a huge screen that allows us to use it as an events space as well, which is really good. And then on the bottom there, you'll see Collyton Station, which is an original Victorian station, much the same as it was, 100 or so years ago, but has now a nice gift shop and a really nice extension where we have our cafe. So that's 3 miles up the line. And to get to Collyton, you have to travel from Seaton. So it's modern Seaton, travelling back in time to Collyton. And you pass through the beautiful Axe Estuary. So we have Seaton wetlands on the left of the track and the River Axe on the right. So it really is quite a stunning journey. So we were lucky enough to get some money from the National Lottery in 2019. We had a substantial grant from the Heritage Fund, which enabled us to build 2 new halt stations. And the one on the left, you can see there is our Riverside halt. So it gives you an idea of the scenery that you would experience when you're on the line and travelling north to Collyton. And on the right, you'll see a picture of our Riverside depot. That's where all the magic happens, where the trams are serviced. We have building projects going on there, and most of the trams live there overnight as well. And it's where our offices are. So Seaton Tramway today is a very, very important tourist attraction for East Devon. We will bring in about just under 100,000 people a year to Seaton. And we have not just a really busy tram service, which operates daily from, 7 days a week from Easter to the end of October, but it's also open at weekends between February and Easter. In addition to the normal service, we also operate an awful lot of activities. So you'll see on the right, the top top left-hand picture, you'll see our pirate tram, which is a school holiday activity for children where the boat tram becomes a boat. And we have children, we have actors, we bring in actors who act as pirates, and the children have a great time on that. The bottom picture there shows our pink tram, which is one of our 3 accessible trams, which is a low floor base tram, which has wheelchair bays. So over the years, we've worked really hard to become more accessible, and we're actually in the process of building 3 new accessible trams, which are single decker all-weather trams as well. So we're working really hard on that to encourage more people with access with mobility problems to be able to travel on the tramway. As I said, we have had some money from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which has made a huge difference to the tramway. Apart from building 2 new halt stations, one of which was at Riverside, which I showed you, and one is at the wetlands. We've also introduced some new activities such as Story Tram, which is for children and their parents or carers, and that's a monthly activity based on storytelling. And we also run Memory Tram for people with dementia and their carers, both of which have become very, very popular. In fact, Story Tram has just won a gold award at the Visit Southwest Awards and also at Visit Devon, and we're going through now to the Visit England Awards, I believe, specifically for the Story Tram events. So we're really, really proud of that. So basically, to round up, we are no longer just a mode of transport, although we do operate as we are seen as a form of public transport, but we are very much a tourist attraction, bringing lots of people into Devon, into East Devon. And very excitingly, we have just purchased another building next door to our tram station, and that is going to be Jurassic Discovery, owned by Modern Electric Tramways, which is actually a charity. And we're going to be opening that on Good Friday, and it's going to be a soft play area, dinosaur themed. And then in July, we're opening another part of it, which is a dinosaur exhibition with animatronic dinosaurs from the Natural History Museum, which we've secured. So always expanding, always looking to bring more people in, and to, as I say, to really improve accessibility and open ourselves up to new audiences. Thank you very much for listening.
That's brilliant, Nicola. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you for sticking to time. As regular members of the audience may know, what we normally do is leave questions until the end, but Nicola has to leave early. But we do have 5 minutes or so for any questions for Nicola now, if there's anything anybody would like to ask. So if you'd like to ask something, either unmute and wave your hand around or type your question into chat. While we're waiting for questions to come in, can I ask one? Because I was thinking, as an electric tramway, you haven't got the problem of all these heritage railways of rocketing costs of coal. But has the increased cost of electricity affected you at all?
We were tied in. We managed to tie ourselves into a contract.
Brilliant.
Before it happened. So we haven't been affected too badly. We do actually have solar panels on our roof as well. So, we do use solar energy partly. We can't run entirely off that, but that does help a little bit. But we haven't noticed, no, we haven't been really stung that way. So we've been a bit canny in that way, but it would be a problem otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really fortunate situation to be in, isn't it? Because a lot of heritage railways seem to be in crisis at the moment.
They really are, yeah. And we seem to be bucking the trend a little bit because a lot of heritage railways are struggling because of that, spiraling costs. But we're okay. We've had some very good seasons over the last few years since COVID. So financially, we're pretty good, solid at the moment.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, Hugh, you have your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Well, I was fascinated to hear that because I just wondered how much it costs from Seaton up to Colleton, because I used to live in Seaton, and I can remember very early 1950s catching the train in Seaton to go to school in North Devon. It was really across country, but it was fascinating.
Okay, thank you for that, Hugh. We've got another question in chat, Nicola. It says here, interesting to hear about the new trams. This is from Richard Hill. Are they designed and built in-house?
Some of them have been. Some of them are brand new, but they're built to a specification based on one of the old city trams. Some of them are new, have new bodies built on original chassis. And sometimes we have to get them built off site, but we've got a team of fantastic engineers who have been there for years and who have actually built them from scratch. So we do have some original old trams dating from the early 1900s as well. So it's a bit of a collection, some originals, some with new bodies, but original chassis, but they all are in heritage style. So they don't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily know that they were newer, apart from the fact that, for example, one of our accessible trams, we've just enclosed the wheelchair bay, so it's got a sort of folding out door, so you would know that that wasn't an original feature. But we try to keep them as original looking as possible, so that they're true to their origins, really. And sorry, just to mention, to answer David's question, the cost of the cost to get from Seaton to Colleton as just increased to £14 for an all-day Explorer ticket, but that means you can jump on and off the tram as often as you like, so you can travel all day on different trams. There is a cheaper ticket if you wanted to just go from one to the other as well, but there's just a range of different ticket options, because you could go, for example, from Seaton to the Wetlands or Seaton to Colliford, but the cheapest option is the all-day Explorer for £14.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Nicola? I was just wondering, there's a big enthusiast community that surrounds steam trains. Is there a heritage tram enthusiast community? Do you run special events for them?
We do. Yes, there are lots of people that are very interested in heritage trams, but they tend to be interested in trams and trains as well. Okay. What we do, for example, every year we have an annual model railway exhibition in our station that attracts a lot of people. So we actually have a massive archive of objects, artifacts, documents as well, which at some point we are hoping to be able to house in some kind of a exhibition museum, but that's the next step of our business plan, really. But yes, we have a huge amount of enthusiasts who visit us regularly.
Good to hear. Phil Long's made a comment about the Crick Tramway Museum. I don't know it. But...
Right.
Okay, any more questions for Nicola? Nothing coming in through chat. No hands raised. Okay. In that case, thank you very much, Nicola. And can I just invite the audience? Can we just give Nicola a round of applause, please?
Thank you. And I'm sorry I have to leave early, but I'm at a new place of work, so apologies for that. But I would be very interested in seeing the rest of it, the recording, please. So
yeah, we'll let you know, sure.
Okay, thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nicola.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Okay, our next speaker is Tim Stephen, and Tim is Secretary and Trustee of the really quite unique Volks Electric Railway Association in Brighton. So the association is something that doesn't run the railway, but is supportive of it. So I'll hand over to Tim, who's going to talk about Volks.
Right. Hello, everybody. As has just been said, I don't actually work for the railway itself, which is owned and operated by Brighton City Council, at least owned and operated day to day. But I work for this other organisation seen in the bottom right-hand corner. How that came about, we'll come to. So thinking about what to say today, I thought, well, this is very elementary stuff, and I think it's true for any heritage transport. To survive, It needs a purpose, or several purposes, perhaps combined, even better. It needs to be in good condition. Obviously, people don't go on holiday to be confronted by a rundown relic. And slightly complicated, but reference to the Volks in particular does need to be supported both by the owner, the users, and in the case of the Volks, the community at large. So I could talk about this slide for about 20 minutes, but I don't think that would be very popular. This is actually the opening day. In fact, up there you can see the clock at about 4 minutes to 12 on the morning of the 4th of August, 1883. And this was the very first section of line that was laid on an experimental basis. Magnus Volk himself is standing on the rear platform. We think it's going to go off to the right, so I hope that the mayor is going to give way to a driver who knows what he's doing. Anyway, so the question is, having started all those years ago, why is it still there? So this is the railway a few years later with a wider gauge and so forth, and it's settled down into a day-to-day existence. It was about half the length at that time than it was now. And basically, one of the main attractions of it was that it was a novelty, because electric transport was indeed a novelty. And as you probably know, it is actually the oldest operating electric railway in the world, meaning still in the same position, running the same type of rolling stock. And there's a Guinness certificate to prove it. So at that time, it was fairly casual, as you can see. It is electrified, but on a two-rail principle. People are wandering about, and there's quite an exciting dip in the line here where it goes underneath the old chain pier, which got washed away a few years later. So it was certainly very popular. I guess it was used by tourists and holidaymakers as well as locals. Another purpose, of course, apart from an enjoyable ride, was transport. Now this, as you can see, is a picture taken about 1913. And this is actually at the pier end, the west end of the railway. But it's being advertised here as the Black Rock Railway. So as well as all the excitement of travelling on a new form of transport, he's trying to get people to use it to travel to Black Rock. Oh, by the way, yes, you saw a banner halfway along at that time. There was a seaplane station, actually, what is now the halfway point, and then was the terminus. So that was something else to go and see. So you could save your feet and use it for transport from the pier. When it eventually got to Black Rock in about 1901, there wasn't a lot there. So whether going to Black Rock was really a sort of form of transport, I'm not sure. It was still a bit of a novelty. And there was a nice view of the White Cliffs and somebody selling something on a table, but not much else. So its purpose for transport, in as far as taking people to Black Rock, is a little bit debatable, but it was certainly popular for leisure. Yes, the station a few years later was rebuilt to what was referred to as the bungalow station, which obviously made it a little bit more pleasant to visit, although there seems to be pretty stiff sea breeze. But behind to the left, there is still a sort of bleak promontory with a nice view of the cliffs and not much else. But a few years later, just before the war, here we are again with a new station just completed right on the doorstep of this very popular Lido at Black Rock. And how popular you can see from, it's a bit of a fuzzy photograph, but you can see all the people here A lot have come by road, of course. But if you were living in the town as it was then, and you wanted to get to the Lido, why not use the Volks? So it was certainly in use as a form of transport. And this continued after the war, when the station was rebuilt, even bigger and better than the small one before the war. And in the background, there is a tower, which is the entrance to the Lido. So very popular it was too. But now, here we are at Blackrock today, actually, this very day. We've got a huge marina here, but look where the Volk station is. That's the terminus. And oh dear me, virtually all the passengers going to Blackrock want to go to the marina. And they have to walk about 300 yards, 400 yards to get there. Why can't the railway go further, we ask? Well, we'll come to that in a moment. So turning to the other aspect of successful seaside transport, obviously condition is very important. And this is a bit of an extreme view, which shows some of the very early carriages that were stored after the war but deteriorated badly, and those two actually had to be scrapped. But the council decided, well, because they'd taken it over just before the war, the council decided that with an anticipated boom in seaside holidays by public transport, they would spend a lot of money and get the railway back in good order. And here it is, looking pristine, probably about 1949. The sheds had been rebuilt, the stock had been retrieved and polished up. Most of the track was brand new because a lot of it had been destroyed during the war because of the seafront defences. But oh dear me, it languished under council ownership, and from sort of the early success post-war, ridership declined and the condition of the railway declined. And this is how we were in 2008. And you can see the shed was held up by scaffolding. I think it was held up for about 11 years, if I remember right. So things were looking a bit rocky. Not all the trains were in working order by any means. And the track, oh dear. Well, anyone who knows about railway track knows that that is probably going to hide what's underneath. Not good. On the seafront, timbers going rotten, all sorts of bad things happening. But there was a heritage lottery application, and in 2016, a project started called Saving Volks. The shed has disappeared. That was the shed that you saw held up by scaffolding with a temporary storage building alongside, and the project was underway. The grant had been made to the council of about £1.6 million. The council, of course, had to make a major contribution, and the volunteers organisation, which I'll come on to in a moment, the fact that we merely existed comprised a considerable number of people and had done and were doing a lot of work to assist the railway, counted heavily in the favour of the bid. And here we are again fairly recently, nice shiny new sheds. I mean, it's a shame in a way that the old ones had to go, but honestly, the working conditions were absolutely dreadful. And the trains couldn't be lifted inside, so all the major work had to be done outside. The council, by the way, have done their worst with the road markings in this picture. But there you go, that's Brighton for you. Inside the sheds, decent working conditions, a modern pit with good lighting, and indeed the north shed, which this is used as a workshop shed, and it has air treatment. So you can do all sorts of things all during the winter. The rolling stock, of course, had been, 3 of the cars had been taken away and refurbished by Allen Keith Limited at a price, of course. And here we are with the same vehicle looking pristine, not quite in working order, after it had come back to the railway, I think in 2017 or beginning of 2018. So I mentioned the Volunteers Organisation. In 1995, there appeared this stand at a show, an annual show in Brighton, which was held at the Brighton Centre, called Brighton Model World, which later on I ran for about 10 years. And these are the fairly desperate characters who were all council employees. This one here actually was a fairly new manager, full of enthusiasm. And there are some longer serving folk as well. So they appealed for a group to be called Friends of the Volks Railway. Not sure what they expected. Maybe something like Friends of the Royal Pavilion, who raised lots of money, ran all sorts of fundraising activities, and gave the council money to buy expensive things for the Royal Pavilion. Anyway, what they got was a bunch of characters, and that's just an example, who knew an awful lot about railways, rather more in some cases than the council employees. This is a fairly modern shot. I mean, we're up to everything here. You can see this is a poster for the association. We've become a charity in 2019, although being founded in 1995 at a public meeting. And there's all sorts of other things going on in the background, admin, rule books, all sorts of things, training. So we're up to just about anything we're asked to do. And last year we celebrated the 140th anniversary of the railway. This is somebody in true Victorian dress. Tim Dunn came and addressed the assembled multitude and dignitaries. And in the front we have somewhere, there's the leader of the council is there. Oh, there she is. And the mayor. And quite a lot of people behind listening to what was going on, and a bit of a parade, and quite a number of other activities during the weekend, culminating in a display of all the working trains and all the cars. There's 6 of them at the moment, well, 6.5, which I'll show you. Six working electric cars, 1 diesel used for engineering works. And this is a project which is dear to the hearts of the voluntary organisation, VERA, the association that is, which is hopefully one day the restoration of one of the ex-Southend pier cars that used to run on the railway but had to be taken away in 2008. We saved it, actually. Otherwise, it would have been for scrap. So, yes, a lot of work is done on marketing, of course, but sometimes here we are. Here's the aquarium station, again, another building rebuilt under the lottery. Sometimes the people just come. This shot actually is from the top of the zip wire. So I don't think the photographer went down it. And I don't know what's going on that day. I think it's a scooter rally or something. Train just pulling into the platform. The building itself here is much more commodious than the old one. And it's a bit of an activity centre and a visitor centre as well as being a station. So why has the Volks survived all these years? Well, it's been lots of things. It's still an attraction. It provides transport in a way. Quite a number of people do use it to get to the marina, and they get a bit annoyed at the 300-yard walk at the end. And it's certainly used for education, and that's where that new visitor centre comes in. It's in good condition now, but council budgets are what they are, and you don't quite know what's going to happen next. And there's always stress on the budgets, and we do a lot of work. I'm not sure whether it will survive without the association, actually. And here's a key question at the end. Does it have the support of the owner? Well, of course, it's irrelevant to the Volks, I mean, for most railways, the answer is obviously yes. But with the council, yes, there are people who would just love to get rid of it. It's a real pain, it gets between the beach and the road, and budget cuts occur and all that sort of business. Users, well, quite a lot of even Victorian times, the early users were a bit against it because it was an electric railway and it got in their way, went in the way of the fishermen. And just recently, there was concerns about safety. It is an electric railway on the beach, after all. And that particularly applied to the community at large. So the support of all these people, well, it's there most of the time, but you have to work on it. And there are times when it certainly cannot be taken for granted. So thanks very much for the quick gallop through a bit of history on the Volks. Hope you found it interesting. And I hope I showed a little bit the way in which those principles applied to the Volks, which might explain why it's still there to this day. Thanks very much.
That's brilliant, Tim. Thank you very much. I think it just impresses on all of us what an absolutely unique sort of railway it is, an electric railway on a beach. Is there anything anywhere else like it? Do you want to take questions now, or should we leave it to the end?
I can take questions now.
And I should add, thank you very much for sticking to time, because you got through a lot of content there and it was really interesting. Okay, feel free to ask any questions through chat or raise your hand. So we have a question from Richard Ryan. How does it do financially? How much subsidy is required?
Well, that's a good question. Back in the sort of early 2000s, it wasn't doing very well at all, and it was a bit of a loss leader, shall we say, or regarded as such by the council. And indeed, when the association was first formed in 1995, there was still talk about retiring the whole thing and putting it in a park just on the edge of Brighton, which would have, well, I needn't say, that would certainly not have worked. And I don't think the railway would have survived that move. Yes, there are a few people who regard it as a nuisance today. But I mean, on the whole, I think working at it, it is quite popular, but you never know with councils. There's a Labour council at the moment. It was a Green council, but it changed to Labour fairly recently.
Okay. We've got two questions. Caroline and Alan are both asking if there's any possibility that the Volks Railway will be extended at the marina end.
Well, the last year on August the 12th, which was the day of those speeches that you quickly saw, Tim Dunn, who probably many of you have come across, took it upon himself to lecture the mayor, the leader of the council, and the assembled dignitaries about their lack of vim or enthusiasm for getting the railway to where it needed to be, which was on the doorstep of the marina. He certainly gave it to them straight. I don't think our association put him up to it. But ever since we were formed in 1995, we've always plugged away and tried to persuade them to take it to the marina, because the marina was then completed or long completed. And they've never done it. At the other end, it has been cut short over the years, because it used to be right at the pier, as you saw from the early photograph. And now it's about a couple of 100 yards away. But there's quite a lot actually going on sort of in that direction, and people do find themselves actually going down there much more. The old adage used to be that all the crowds stay between the two piers. That is when there were two piers, of course. One's fallen into the sea, but that's another story. So there we go. At the moment, actually, they had quite a successful, coming back to the finances, quite a successful year last year. There are 4 permanent employees at the moment, and all the rest, the drivers, the cashiers, and a part-time engineer, are seasonal. But it is a 7-day-a-week operation from Good Friday onwards. So there always has to be 2 members of staff, 2 members of permanent staff, or at least 1 assistant engineer, perhaps seasonal, and 1 permanent manager or deputy manager on duty when the railway's running. So it is quite an expensive operation for a railway just under a mile long. There's a fair number of staff.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from Phil, who asks, do you have any data on the number of international visitors?
Its short answer is no, but people do turn up from all sorts of places. I think when we first started, there wasn't a brown sign to be seen in 1995. And the marketing of the railway was woefully absent, or virtually nil, to our annoyance. And we did quite a bit over the years to persuade the council to take it seriously. But notwithstanding all that, people would suddenly turn up at the station and announce they'd come from Japan or somewhere far-flung. The Japanese, very popular, the Japanese, actually. And I've heard people asking on the buses at the station how to get to the Volks Railway, or also to the Seven Sisters, where they wanted to see where the Harry Potter was filmed, one of the popular locations. But yes, people come from all over the world. We had quite a number of visitors from abroad actually came to the celebrations last year. But day by day, all sorts of people turn up. Well, along the seafront, is the eastern seafront, as you saw, towards Blackrock, the coaches park, and there are tons of visitors come from overseas. I mean, I was down there today, and you may have glimpsed 1 or 2 in that photograph of Blackrock, but there was about 10 or 12 coaches. 3/4 of them were from abroad. Eastern Europe.
It's a truly
they're coming
international
to
attraction.
Brighton from all over Europe. And so they get off the coaches, and the Volks Railway's right next door.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thanks very much, Tim. We have to move on now. And we now come to our third speaker, who is Steph Costello, who's the Visitor Destination and Engagement Manager for Redcar and Cleveland Council, which manages the Saltburn Cliff Tramway. And for those of you that don't know, Saltburn Cliff Tramway was the winner of our first bucket and spade list last year. So, Steph, over to you.
Hi, afternoon. I suppose evening now, everyone. Thank you for asking me to come and speak today. And again, I think, just to reiterate, it was an absolute honour to win the bucket and spade list. It was, to even be nominated for a nominee was amazing, but to actually win it was even better. So thank you very much for that. And I suppose while it's the same as the other guest speakers, I'm here today to kind of give a whistle-stop journey through the history of Saltburn and its tramway. When Duncan first asked and said, can you keep it to a time frame? And I was thinking, yeah, not a problem. And then actually, when I was putting the content together, I thought I could actually talk about this for ages. So I will kind of go through, not very quickly, but I will, if anybody does have any questions at the end, feel free to ask them. I may not be able to answer them because I have only been managing the tramway for a short period, but I will get back to everybody tomorrow with a response from the tramway team. So, yeah. So I suppose the story begins in Saltburn. It's a charming coastal town in North Yorkshire, Tees Valley. It's known for its stunning cliffs and sandy beaches. and even to this day, it's kind of Victorian authenticity. It's still a very popular tourist destination for holidaymakers and beach users. The tramway is now very much an iconic structure to Saltburn's landscape, and it's the Tees Valley, it's the region's most prominent heritage asset. Last season, so in 2023, we welcomed 180,000 passengers on board, which is amazing. The tramway's open, pretty much similar to most seasonal attractions, I suppose, from usually Easter up until about October, and then it'll cut down to weekends, and then it closes for a period and then reopens again. So I think that's an amazing figure of passengers. So the inspiration for the cliff lift, I think there was I had to give a bit of an overview of why and where the tramway came from. So it came from the success of Saltburn Pier. John Anderson, who was formerly an engineer for the Stockton and Darlington Railway, it was his inspiration. The area was, and still is, very heavy industrialised. We've got a lot of mines and industry down there. And I suppose many Victorian towns work as leisure time. It was strictly limited, and days out to the seaside were a family treat. And usually at that period, it was those destinations that were connected with the railway. So the Stockton and Darlington Railway line opened in August 1861. Which kind of, became a railway town. And then Henry Pease, another local person, had an inspiration to develop Saltburn further. And from there, he founded the Saltburn Improvement Company. And the development of Saltburn really began from that point. As I mentioned, the Saltburn Pier opened I'm trying to remember these, May 1869, and was the first pier on Cleveland's coast, I believe. And within 6 months, it had attracted 50,000 visitors. So for those who have never been to Saltburn before, or the beach and the town is separated by a cliff. Now, back in the day, I suppose that cliff would have been more of a struggle than it is today. But Anderson and Henry Pease needed a solution to get people from the pier up and down that bank. I think it's graded at 25 gradient, so it's quite a steep bank, and it's a bit of a mission to get up and down. So the result of this originally was a vertical cliff hoist, which you can see on the image at the bottom of the slide, which was just a timber tower that kind of protruded from over the cliff and down. And this was held down, I think, pretty much by guy rope, so it won't come as any surprise when it was deemed unsafe and demolished in 1883. And then from that point, a new system, some sort of lift device was very much needed. So the tramway was designed by George Croydon Marks, who kind of envisaged a modern transport system that would easily would give access and would give people the chance to get up and down the cliff. The design is incorporated, and still is today, with really initiative engineering techniques of the time, and this incorporated the system of counterbalancing water tanks. So very simple, but effective way of operating. So how it works is there's two trams on a parallel track. Both are fitted with water tanks, and the tram at the top has its water tank filled with water until it overbalances the tram at the bottom, and then they descend and ascend. And the amount of water pumped into each tank is determined by the amount of people on each tram. The tramway was originally built to carry 12 people. But as years have gone by, and I don't know if it's politically correct, people have got a little bit bigger, I dare say. The trams are obviously now governed by how many, so that figure's probably turned to about 8 in a tram. And when the tram reaches the bottom, water is then repumped back up to the top, and the whole process starts again. And the entire operation is operated by a single operator in the top station with a ship's wheel who controls the speed of the trams, and then finally they stop as the trams reach their stations. On So on June the 28th, 1884, the Saltburn Cliff opened through a great fanfare and celebration, and it quickly became the popular attraction then as it is now, offering visitors a descent to the beach and back. So obviously a lot of tourist heritage, these coastal towns, the Victorian era kind of give birth to these, these destinations, and Saltburn at that time and has now today has flourished as a holidays destination. I think the tramway at the moment still plays a very crucial role in facilitating tourism, but also its culture, and it adds to the local economy. It's convenient access to the beach for both visitors and locals, and it gets people moving between the two. So some might come for, some people see the tramway as a visitor attraction and come purely to have a ride on the tramway, where some, mostly residents, see it as a local amenity to help them get up and down the banks. So today it is the oldest Cliff Tramway still in operation today in Great Britain, and it links the Victorian seaside town with the only remaining pleasure pier on the northeastern Yorkshire coast, which is pretty something to be proud of, I think. And it stands a testament, I suppose, of the Victorian engineering and the spirit of seaside leisure that was born in that era. It isn't just a mode of transport. I think, it's very cherished by Saltburn's culture, and it is loved by everyone, young, old, residents, visitors. It's really well appreciated. But similar to what Tim said, I think it's that kind of element of, you have to not use it and lose it, but there has to be an emphasis on, people need to take pride in it. People need to kind of come out and support it a little bit too. So I suppose, and I could have gone into a lot more detail around this, and I've just kind of left it as it is. But like any heritage asset, it faces a lot of challenges. We look after it. It has annual maintenance every year. And at that point, and that could be anything from changing cables to brake pads. I say brake pads, they're wooden shoes. But when you mix old with new, nothing ever goes straightforward. It has its teething problems, but we do our best and we work on it, and we do get it kind of open again. In recent years, we've done a lot to try and modernise the tramway while still preserving its kind of historical integrity. There was a couple of questions asked about from previous presentations around the use of electric and things like that. It's quite sustainable in the way it operates. We collect a lot of water from the bank. So when we have a lot of rain in Saltburn, that water's kind of fed through down the bank and collected. And only when we I'm going to say run out of water, but when we need to top the tanks up, we can. But majority is kind of water that has come from rain and is collected from the bank. So we're quite sustainable in that way. And we would be looking at, potentially other ways that we can kind of future-proof it, maybe solar panels, that type of thing on the bank. I think the last major refurbishment that we had to it was back in 2017 and 2018, and it had a heritage lot refund. And with that, we built new rails. It had new Scotch timbers fitted. It had new lifelines and a full carriage refurbishment, which I think you can see on the top picture. It's not very often you kind of see the trams being lifted off the bank, so that was quite an iconic moment. And then renovations like this have just kind of make it sustainable. It's it's an iconic landmark. It retains its operation, and we try our very best to kind of do that. I think unfortunately, most recently, the tramway has suffered a fire and it has been severely damaged, as you can see from that bottom picture there. So yeah, as you can see from them pictures, we've had it suffered severe fire damage. We will obviously repair and restore. It's grade listed building, so our hands are tied at the moment. We can't do anything until we have this listed building consent. We're hopeful we will have that in around May when it goes to committee, and from there we have a plan of attack to get the tramway back open. We're stuck in a little bit of limbo at the moment, regardless to the listed building consent. Nothing really seemed to go in our favour in terms of, you know, what we could do, what we couldn't do. Because the fire started electrically, we couldn't go access to the tramway. We couldn't get into the bottom station until the feed was off. Now, we found a third wire that we weren't aware of. It was live. They'd gone in to remove asbestos, and then the asbestos people wouldn't go in, and then the electric people wouldn't go in because there was asbestos. And we really went through a catch-22 situation before we could even get in to look at the damage. And now we're at a point where we can get in. It's had a clean, it's, you know, it's been stripped, it's, you know, it is back to a blank canvas, I suppose, with the pump room. But now we can't get on with any winter maintenance because the lifeline, which allows staff on the tracks, is damaged. So we have to wait for that to be repaired before any winter maintenance can take place. And yeah, it's just all catch-22s at the moment. But we are very we're all working extremely hard. We have a plan of attack to get this open as and when we can. We're hoping to get it open for the summer, if not in time for its 140th birthday in June. We had planned to have a nice kind of day similar to what Tim had showed for Volks, celebrating the asset. Yeah, let's just see. Let's just see what happens. And then finally, I did pop in, if I've still got time at the end there, I did pop in a little video at the end just to kind of, more so because we'd had it prepared for this year. I don't know if it will play. It was just a very little snapshot of obviously the trams going down the bank. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, thank you for listening. I appreciate I might have told a lot there. I was just trying to get everything in really quickly.
That's great, Steph. And it was worth waiting for the video. We've probably got time for just one question. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type it into chat. But while you're thinking of your questions, we'd like to remind you about this year's bucket and spade list. Anya's put the link in the chat. I'm sure she'll do it again, but please feel free to vote, or nominate rather, any sites that you'd like to be part of the list that we vote on for this year's bucket and spade list. I can't see any questions. Anybody have a question for Steph? Okay. Well, I'll draw the seminar to a close. And of course, the one thing we must do is say thanks once again to our three speakers. So let's offer them a real or virtual round of applause. Thank you very much, all. As Anya's put in the chat, our next seminar is on the 15th of May, and that's all about the Celtic seaside. And one more date for your diary is Monday, the 16th of September, when we're having our annual meeting at Weston-super-Mare. Which will include a brief presentation about Weston by our very own Alan Brodie, a conversation with Paul Doe, who's the author of From a Bag of Chips to Cod Confit, the announcement of the winner of this year's Bucket and Spade list, and we're going to end with a Punch and Judy show from Professor Joe, who was the speaker at our last seminar. So once again, thanks to all our speakers, and thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great
everyone.
talks. Thank you.